My dear brothers and sisters, Allah is the ultimate protector. And Surah Al-Fil teaches this truth in a way that shakes the heart and awakens certainty. The house of Allah stood in Mecca with no walls of soldiers, no weapons, no human defense, yet it was under the direct care of the Lord of the worlds. When danger approached, Allah did not ask His servants to prove their strength, nor did He demand strategy or planning from them. He showed humanity that His protection does not depend on visible means. When Allah guards something, it is guarded completely, even if the world believes it to be vulnerable. This realization brings peace to the believer's heart, because it reminds us that our safety, our faith, and our destiny are not controlled by people, systems, or circumstances, but by Allah alone, the one who sees what we cannot see and plans beyond our understanding. In Surah Al-Fil, Allah demonstrates that His protection often comes in ways that defy human logic. An army equipped with power, confidence, and elephants was stopped not by force, but by divine command. Birds carrying small stones became instruments of Allah's will, showing that He does not need grand tools to achieve grand outcomes. This teaches the believer that no matter how overwhelming a problem appears, Allah's protection is always greater than the threat. When fear surrounds you, when the odds are stacked against you, remember that Allah does not require reasons to help you. He simply wills, and it happens. This understanding strengthens Iman and removes panic from the heart, because the believer knows that even unseen help can change the course of events in a single moment. The protection of Allah is not limited to places or history. It extends to hearts, souls, and faith itself. Just as Allah protected the Kaaba before the birth of the Prophet, somehow He protects the Iman of those who sincerely turn to Him. When a believer struggles with doubts, sins, or weakness, Allah's protection manifests through guidance, reminders, and opportunities to return. Sometimes protection means removing a temptation, sometimes it means placing a barrier between you and harm, and sometimes it means allowing hardship to refine you. Surah Al-Fil reminds us that Allah knows what threatens us even when we are unaware. He shields His servants from dangers they never see and from losses they never realize, nurturing trust in His wisdom and care. Allah's protection also teaches humility, because when we recognize that safety comes from Him, pride has no place in the heart. Abraha relied on power and arrogance, believing strength guaranteed success, while the people of Mecca relied on Allah alone. This contrast shows that those who trust in Allah are never truly weak, even if they appear powerless, and those who trust only in themselves are always vulnerable, even with great resources. For the believer, this lesson transforms the way life is approached. Instead of fearing people, systems, or outcomes, the heart attaches itself to Allah. This reliance produces calmness, patience, and dignity, because the believer knows that no harm can touch them unless Allah allows it. Surah Al-Fil reassures every struggling heart that Allah's protection precedes His mercy and guidance. Before the Prophet was born, Allah cleared the path, removed the threat, and established a sign that would echo through generations. In the same way, Allah often protects you before granting you something greater, even if you do not recognize it at the time. Delays, closed doors, and unexpected outcomes can be forms of divine protection. When life does not go as planned, the believer remembers that Allah may be shielding them from harm or preparing them for something better. This certainty nurtures hope, strengthens patience, and deepens trust, allowing the heart to rest in the care of the one who never neglects His servants. Arrogance always leads to destruction. And Surah Al-Fil stands as a timeless warning for every heart that begins to feel self-sufficient. When a person believes their power, wealth, knowledge, or status makes them untouchable, they slowly forget the one who granted those blessings. Abraham marched with confidence, convinced that force would bend the world to his will. His heart was filled with pride, not humility, and that pride blinded him to reality. Arrogance creates an illusion of control, making a person believe success is guaranteed and failure impossible. Yet this illusion is fragile, because it is built on ego rather than truth. Allah allows arrogance to rise only so that its fall becomes a lesson for others. When pride takes root, it silences gratitude, kills humility, and disconnects the soul from Allah, leaving it exposed and vulnerable. Arrogance is dangerous because it removes the fear of Allah from the heart. A person consumed by pride no longer reflects on consequences, accountability, or the hereafter. Abraha did not stop to think about the sanctity of the Kaaba or the power of the Lord he was challenging. He trusted his army, his elephant, and his authority. Surah Al-Fil shows that when arrogance reaches its peak, destruction follows swiftly and decisively. Allah does not need to negotiate with pride, nor does He delay justice once the lesson is meant to be delivered. This teaches believers to guard their hearts constantly, because arrogance can enter subtly through success, praise, or even religious deeds. When a servant forgets that everything comes from Allah, the fall may be sudden, unexpected, and humiliating. Allah humbles the arrogant in ways that strip them of dignity and leave them as examples for others. In Surah Al-Fil, the mightiest army was defeated by the smallest of Allah's creation, birds carrying stones. This contrast is deliberate and powerful. Allah shows that arrogance does not collapse under equal force but under divine wisdom. When someone thinks they are too big to fail, Allah reminds them how small they truly are. History repeatedly proves that empires, leaders, and individuals collapse not because of weakness, but because of pride. The believer learns from this that true strength lies in humility. When you bow to Allah, He elevates you. When you rise against Him with arrogance, He lowers you. No matter how high you appear in the eyes of people, arrogance also destroys relationships, communities, and faith itself. A proud heart cannot accept advice, correction, or truth when it conflicts with ego. Abraha did not listen, reflect, or reconsider. Pride made him deaf to wisdom and blind to signs. In everyday life, arrogance causes people to belittle others, reject sincere reminders, and justify wrongdoing. It creates distance between hearts and removes barakah from actions. Surah Al-Fil teaches that Allah does not side with those who oppress, mock, or dominate others out of pride. He stands with humility, sincerity, and submission. A believer who understands this lesson strives to lower themselves before Allah and treat others with kindness, knowing that arrogance is not only disliked by Allah, but actively leads toward ruin. The destruction caused by arrogance is not always immediate, but it is always certain. Sometimes Allah allows the arrogant to rise higher, so their fall becomes clearer and more instructive. Surah Al-Fil reminds believers that arrogance is a spiritual disease that must be cured before it consumes the heart. The cure lies in remembering Allah's greatness, reflecting on human weakness, and recognizing that every breath is a gift. When a believer humbles themselves, they protect their soul from collapse. When they acknowledge Allah as the source of all success, they remain grounded even in times of ease. This awareness builds sincerity, gratitude, and balance. Keeping the heart safe from the destructive path that pride inevitably carves, small means can bring great victory by Allah's will. And Surah Al-Fil engraves this truth deeply into the heart of every believer. When Allah decided to stop a powerful army, He did not deploy massive forces or visible miracles that matched human expectations. Instead, He chose something that appeared insignificant in the eyes of people. Birds carrying small stones became the means through which Allah's command was fulfilled. This teaches us that effectiveness is not measured by size, strength, or numbers, but by divine permission. What humans consider weak may carry immense power when Allah places His will within it. This understanding reshapes the believer's mindset, freeing them from despair when resources are limited and reminding them that Allah's help is never constrained by what we perceive as sufficient or insufficient. Allah repeatedly teaches humanity that victory does not depend on material advantage. In Surah Al-Fil, the contrast between the massive army and the tiny birds is intentional, showing that Allah dismantles human arrogance through unexpected means. For the believer, this lesson brings comfort in moments of limitation. When you feel unqualified, under-resourced, or overwhelmed, remember that Allah often chooses simple paths to achieve profound outcomes. A sincere dua, a quiet act of patience, or a single moment of repentance can outweigh years of planning driven by ego. Allah looks at the heart and the intention, not the scale of effort. When sincerity is present, even the smallest action can become a turning point that changes the course of a life. The power of small means also teaches believers to value consistency in worship and goodness. People often delay action, believing that only large gestures matter, while neglecting simple daily acts of obedience. Surah Al-Fil corrects this thinking by showing that Allah works through what appears minor to human eyes. A single sajdah made with humility, a whispered hiccup repeated with presence, or a small charity given sincerely can unlock Allah's help. These acts may seem insignificant, yet they carry weight beyond imagination when done for His sake. This realization encourages believers to remain steadfast in simple deeds, trusting that Allah multiplies their impact in ways unseen, transforming small efforts into sources of immense spiritual strength. Small means also cultivate humility within the believer. When Allah grants victory through unexpected and modest tools, it removes pride from the heart and reinforces dependence on Him alone. Surah Al-Fil reminds us that Allah does not need our strength, our status, or our intelligence to fulfill His plan. He only asks for submission and trust. This lesson protects the believer from arrogance during success and despair during hardship. When things work out despite minimal resources, the heart recognizes Allah's hand at work. This recognition strengthens Iman and deepens reliance, teaching the believer to attribute every achievement to Allah rather than personal effort. Ensuring that gratitude remains alive and sincerity remains intact. The lesson of small means extends into personal struggles, trials, and spiritual battles. A person may feel trapped by sin, fear, or hearts, believing the situation too great to overcome. Surah Al-Fil offers hope by reminding us that Allah can change circumstances through the simplest steps. A single decision to return to Allah, one sincere tear shed in repentance, or one moment of patience can begin a transformation. Allah does not require dramatic gestures to bring relief. He asks for honesty and effort within our capacity. When a believer takes that small step toward Allah, Allah opens doors that could never be forced open by human strength alone. Tawakkul brings peace in times of fear. And Surah Al-Fil offers one of the clearest examples of what true reliance upon Allah looks like. The people of Mecca faced a threat they could not confront, an army beyond their capacity, power they could not resist. Fear was natural, uncertainty was real, yet their hearts were directed toward Allah. Tawakkul did not remove the danger, but it removed panic from their souls. This teaches the believer that reliance on Allah does not always change the situation immediately, but it transforms the heart facing it. When a servant hands their fear to Allah, the heart finds calm even while standing at the edge of the unknown. Tawakkul is the decision to trust Allah's wisdom over personal anxiety, to believe that whatever outcome unfolds carries divine purpose. True tawakkul begins when human ability reaches its limit. The people of Mecca did not pretend they were strong, nor did they deny their vulnerability. They acknowledged their weakness and stepped back, entrusting the matter entirely to Allah. This is the essence of tawakkul, recognizing that control belongs to Allah alone. Many hearts remain restless because they attempt to carry burdens meant only for Allah. Surah Al-Fil reminds believers that peace is found not in controlling outcomes, but in surrendering them. When fear tightens the chest and the future feels uncertain, tawakkul whispers reassurance that Allah sees what we cannot. This reliance softens the heart, allowing it to breathe even in moments of pressure, because trust replaces anxiety and certainty replaces doubt. Tawakkul does not mean passivity. It means confidence in Allah's decree after doing what is within one's ability. The people of Mecca took the step of detaching from arrogance and turning to Allah with sincerity. They did not rely on false hope or empty optimism, but on the Lord who controls creation. Surah Al-Fil teaches that when fear is handed to Allah, it loses its power over the heart. The believer learns that fear grows when reliance is placed on people, resources, or outcomes, but it diminishes when reliance shifts to Allah. Tawakkul anchors the soul, preventing it from being shaken by events, because trust in Allah creates stability even when circumstances remain unstable. One of the greatest gifts of tawakkul is inner peace during trials. When a believer trusts Allah, fear no longer defines their reactions. Surah Al-Fil shows that Allah can intervene without warning, without expectation, and without effort from His servants. This knowledge calms the heart because the believer understands that help can arrive in ways unseen. Tawakkul teaches patience, allowing the heart to wait without despair and endure without complaint. It replaces constant worry with quiet confidence. reminding the believer that Allah's timing is perfect. Even when the threat feels close, tawakkul creates emotional distance from fear because the heart rests in the certainty that Allah's protection is always nearer than danger. Tawakkul also nurtures spiritual maturity by aligning the heart with acceptance of Allah's will. Whether relief comes immediately or later, the believer remains content knowing Allah's choice is better than personal desire. Surah Al-Fil illustra. Test that Allah's response to reliance is decisive and complete. This strengthens faith, teaching the believer that trust is not wasted and surrender is never ignored. When fear visits the heart, tawakkul responds with remembrance, prayer, and calm endurance. Over time, this reliance reshapes the believer's character, creating resilience without hardness and softness without weakness, allowing the soul to face life's storms, anchored in trust rather than shaken by uncertainty. After protection comes mercy and guidance. And Surah Al-Fil demonstrates this divine principle beautifully through history. Allah protected the Kaaba from a powerful army that sought to destroy it, showing that His care precedes every plan and every mercy. This protection was not only physical but also symbolic, signaling that Allah's attention is always present for those He chooses to honor. The people of Mecca witnessed that the apparent weakness of their defenses did not matter, for Allah's protection was sufficient. This event reminds believers that before blessings, guidance, and opportunities arrive, Allah first secures the path, removes obstacles, and safeguards what He intends to bless. Mercy often flows only after the heart feels safe under His care, creating a foundation of trust and gratitude that allows guidance to be received with sincerity and humility. Protection is often a prelude to guidance, shaping hearts to recognize the source of all success. After Allah defended the Kaaba, the stage was set for the birth of His final messenger, Saban, a mercy to all of humanity. This sequence teaches believers that divine intervention often comes in stages, first safeguarding, then revealing guidance, and then opening the door to spiritual growth. Human beings may not perceive the full picture when trials occur, but Allah's wisdom ensures that protection is always followed by mercy. When the heart experiences relief from danger, it becomes more receptive to faith, reflection, and transformation. Surah Al-Fil illustrates that Allah's plans are purposeful and that protection is not random. It is preparatory, ensuring that when mercy and guidance arrive, they are embraced fully and lead to enduring benefit. Allah's mercy flows after protection because He intends for His servants to grow in trust and reliance. The people of Mecca could have been paralyzed by fear or despair, but their experience with divine protection opened the door for hope and reflection. Surah Al-Fil teaches that relief from harm is not merely a material event, it is a spiritual signal that Allah is near, that He observes, and that He responds to those who turn to Him. This creates a cycle of mercy. Protection builds confidence in His care, which then allows hearts to open to guidance, knowledge, and obedience. Believers learn to see divine protection as a form of mercy in itself, fostering gratitude, humility, and the willingness to follow the path Allah prescribes without hesitation or doubt. The sequence of protection followed by mercy and guidance also strengthens patience and perseverance. Trials and threats may precede Allah's protection, testing faith, endurance, and sincerity. Once the danger passes, the heart becomes more resilient and more appreciative of the blessings that follow. Surah Al-Fil demonstrates that divine wisdom orchestrates events so that protection leads to an enhanced awareness of Allah's presence. Mercy is then understood not as a random favor but as a deliberate act following preparation and intervention. Guidance, knowledge, and spiritual opportunities are most meaningful when the heart has experienced protection, because they are received not in fear or desperation but in gratitude, clarity, and readiness to act upon them. Finally, the pattern of protection leading to mercy and guidance reminds believers that Allah's care is holistic, addressing both outward circumstances and inward growth. Surah Al-Fil teaches that even before the Prophet ﷺ began his mission, Allah's plan included defense, mercy, and illumination. For the believer today, this sequence offers reassurance. When life seems challenging, when fear surrounds you, trust that Allah may be protecting you in unseen ways, preparing a path for mercy and guidance to arrive. The heart learns to see obstacles as temporary, and relief as a sign of divine favor. Protection is the first step, mercy is the encouragement, and guidance is the ultimate reward, demonstrating Allah's wisdom, timing, and love for His servants.